Thank you, Eric, for the warm introduction. I know I'm the last speaker before the break, so it's basically me standing between you guys and a drink or something to eat. So I'll try to keep it nice and short. That is, if you're nice for me, because I've got extra time, and because they all were short. So I can basically amaze you to death for the next 30 minutes. Right. So, short introduction. Who am I? My name is Wian. If you're French or Spanish, don't even try to pronounce it. I'm fine with everything starting with a W. And I'm an app dev SSP for RedHat. Now, who here has heard of RedHat? Well, at least you guys don't have the lazy arm syndrome. That's good. Who here has heard about RedHat because of Linux? Same guys. Awesome. So we do quite a little bit more, but I'm here to tell you about that. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So I'm also the co-author of a great book, DevOps Paradox, by Victor Forsic. I don't know if you've heard of it. If you haven't, which is very likely because it hasn't sold very well yet, please pick up a copy anywhere. Amazon will do. So I've basically been in the DevOps game for the last 10 to 15 years. Infrastructure. Where are we now? First question. And I'm risking blowing my whole presentation out of the water here, or at least getting a lot of you very angry. Who here is an actual developer? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, we're getting there. We're getting there. Who here is a network engineer or an admin? All right. All right. I might not get murdered today. If you're a developer, we live in exciting times. Recently, a new book was launched, even stating developers are the new kingmakers. And, well, they actually are. So if you're a developer, it might be time to ask your boss for a raise. Now, I will tell you why. If my clicker works. Yes. So every company now also is a software company. This is actually a statement by the CEO of BMW stating that they are now a software company trying to provide a mobility experience to their customers. They're not a car maker anymore. So if you drive a BMW, you drive a piece of software, which might explain a couple of things. Digitally advanced enterprises are eight times more likely to grow share than digital non-advanced enterprises. But they still lag behind digital natives. So that basically means if you haven't realized you're a software company yet, there are companies out there that move faster than you. So basically, you're becoming a dinosaur, which is awesome. Dinosaurs are awesome. Very important to most companies these days is winning the hearts and minds of developers. So if you raised your hand when I asked if you were a developer, your boss really loves you. He doesn't always tell you. He really loves you. Because developers enable users throughout the organization, internally and externally, to be productive, to use the organization's product, to actually be faster at what they do. So, if you're not a developer yet, you might want to consider a career change. But why does most of development infrastructure look like this? This is the most accurate picture I could find that would resemble developer infrastructure these days. It's kind of sad, right? Potholes and a road. This is actually a road outside of my a house I lived in for a while in Boston, Massachusetts. It was just horrible. Actually, this wasn't even the biggest pothole. It was a pothole a little bit down the road that could actually swallow a motorcycle. But if you're a company and you want to attract developers, does this look attractive? There is something to fix here, right? So, If you listen to developers these days in modern companies, which I do for a living, what do we hear? Well, we hear my toolset and environment are outdated. Well, GitLab's here to fix that for a bit. I can hardly reach anything. You know, the biggest drive to the public cloud usually is your own internal networking department. I'm risking not being popular here, right? I'm going to be here for the next 2 days. So, another big one. I want to, but I am not allowed. I want to create this API, but I'm not allowed. I want to use this API, but I'm not allowed. If you're not allowed to do something you think is a good idea, that's very frustrating. And if you're frustrated enough, you're going to leave. So, let's define infrastructure, because we all deal with infrastructure every day. If you get up out of bed, get yourself ready for work, drive to work, you've already encountered at least 3 or 4 pieces of infrastructure, right? Who can name them? Electricity, first one. Second one. Roads. But let's not forget water. It's kind of obvious, but water. So what do these things all have in common? They're simple to use. They're available everywhere. And usually, they're as cheap as possible. So why isn't our infrastructure like that? Okay. It can be. It can be like that. And I'm going to tell you what. I'm going to tell you how we can get there. We're not the only company in this game, so bear with me. I might be lying from this point on, because do keep in mind, I am a sales guy. Fear not. Future's very bright. Very bright. Why? Well, the name has fallen already. It's something called Kubernetes. And Kubernetes is very hard at work at becoming the dominant operating system for your data center. So one of the last guys called it a container platform. That might be the case now, but it's going to be more than that, a lot more than that. Because right now, if we're talking about Kubernetes, we're talking about doing stuff with containers. But containers are limited, right? Because I still have my VMs. If we have this conversation next year, we're going to be talking about VMs. And we're going to be talking about onboarding bare metal. So you plug in a server. Kubernetes will detect you plugged in a server and will actually start that server for you. But Kubernetes alone is not enough. And I'll tell you why. Traditionally, if you looked at the open source community, there was one very fast-moving project. Anybody want to take a stab at what that project was? Come on. Well, I like the answer Ansible, but no. It was a Linux kernel, actually. Not anymore. Kubernetes is actually moving at a faster pace now. Has more commits, has more people developing on it. So what do? We have RedHat Openshift. RedHat Openshift is not Kubernetes. It's based on Kubernetes, but it's not Kubernetes. We have been accused of creating a product that is not actual Kubernetes, but we are Kubernetes certified. And if you want to use your default Kubernetes tools with Openshift, that's fine and possible. But what do we do on top of Kubernetes is what makes it interesting. We deliver Kubernetes with, oh shit, that's a little bit. We deliver Kubernetes with onboard monitoring and metrics. We have put a code repository in there, but you're still free to use GitLab. We also work together with GitLab, no problem. And we deliver it on every cloud platform. So if you want to run AWS, it's fine. Just put Openshift on it. If you want to take that same code, put it on Google, it's fine. We run on Google. These days, and I wouldn't have imagined that 5 years ago, these days, even Microsoft, and I'm kind of bummed that they didn't talk about it, even Microsoft is selling our OpenStack platform on their cloud. And it wasn't in there when you talked about open source. Shame on you. So yeah, basically, we have a Kubernetes that installs inside of 20 minutes on any footprint you'd like. If it's bare metal, if it's VMware, even if it's a public cloud. As a managed service or as a self-installed. No problem. And that enables you to take that code that you crafted on your laptop and run it everywhere without changing. Well, that's pretty cool, right? Now, Openshift is quickly becoming our most important flagship product. It is actually the reason IBM bought us. And they paid $34 billion for it. It's not bad, right, for an open source company. So, what do we aim to do with Openshift? We aim to basically enable you, developers, and I'm looking at that third row right there, to use compute, memory, network, and storage as if it was water from a tap. So can anybody put that screen down? Because I'm losing people here. They're either sweating out of the room or not able to see me. Is it better if I stand here? All right, cool. And, you know, Kubernetes, there's so much to talk about that I could literally fill 2 or 3 hours. Not too long ago, I watched a coworker of mine do a simple roadmap presentation, and it took him 2 hours just to get through the highlights. It's just moving in such a rapid pace. It's mind-boggling. So to fill my next 7 minutes, and try to get some time left, I just picked a couple of things. So the first one I think is very cool if you're a developer is a service mesh. Does anybody know what a service mesh is? No, it's an advanced layer on top of your Kubernetes that will take a couple of very tedious tasks that you as a developer had to do and will push them out to infrastructure. Let's say, for instance, you're building a microservice architecture. You know, microservices these days are very popular. If you put that on your resume, it immediately increase your salary with 10,000 euros. It's awesome. But if you're building a microservices infrastructure, there is a bunch of stuff you need to do that is hard. If you want to have an insight into what your microservice is doing, because it's all these little programs with this big network in between, basically, it's just a big monolith with network latency. But you can use a service mesh to actually enable tracing across all those microservices. Because what this service mesh does, for instance, it takes an incoming HTTP call into the cluster, and it will tag it with the UUID. Now, every time that call hits a new service, that information will get logged in the onboard logging of Openshift. And what that does, it will create an overview of where your microservices is being slow or being fast or what it's actually doing in a relatable burn-down graphic, which you can see right there. So if you enable that, you get immediately, you get an overview of how your microservices is responding. Personally, the coolest thing, I think, is this. It automatically creates a diagram of your entire infrastructure. And if that wasn't cool enough, those little dots in between, they actually move. So that's great to show your manager. It comes in primary color so he doesn't get confused. It's awesome. And then the last thing I really want to talk to you guys about is operators. Now, operators are by far the most important technological development done in the Kubernetes space in the last 2 decades. And Kubernetes has only been around for like 6 years. So that's pretty important. What operators do is operators take operational logic and put it into Kubernetes. Because let's be honest, Kubernetes is just one big dumb loop. It will look at what you told it to do, it would look at what it has now, and it will reconcile. And it does that a couple of times every millisecond. So, it basically, you tell it, I want to run this container. It will look at its infrastructure, see if that container is actually running. If it's not running, it will start it. Now, what if I could add complex features to that? What if I would, well, if you're a developer, database would be nice, right? Let's say you want to use Postgres. And I'm particularly not naming Oracle here. Let's say you want to use Postgres, but you want to use it resiliently, so you need a Postgres cluster. And let's say you want to scale for a little bit of I/O, so you want to build a cluster that has 3 read slaves, so instances that can only be read from, and 1 read-write master. And you want to have that version 9.2, because 9.2 rocks. All right, so you can tell that, and I'm not going to demo this. Just let's not do the demo gods thing. And you can tell that to Kubernetes, and Kubernetes knows what it needs to do to actually create that cluster for you, and within 20 minutes, you're up and running. Never have to think about it again. Because next to knowing what it actually needs to do to build that, it also knows what it needs to do when that cluster screws up and goes down. So let's say, for instance, the read-write master goes down. Kubernetes knows that it needs to promote one of the slaves into the new role of read-write master and recreate a slave. Wouldn't that be awesome? You can do that right now. So you don't need a DBA anymore. Here's the DBA. No? No? All right. But that also works for Kafka, for instance. If you do a lot of IoT work with streaming data, building a Kafka cluster usually takes an infrastructure department about 2 days. Kubernetes, believe it or not, can do it inside 10 minutes. And the cool thing is, you build that Kafka cluster for, let's say, version 2.2.3, and if you get bored with it and you want to move to 2.3.0, just pull up the same manifest, change it to 2.3.0, punch it in, presto. And the coolest thing is, if you had a 3-way cluster, for instance, it will just automatically do the first one first, then the second, then the third. You wouldn't even have an outage. So, I'm not going to prove that to you today, but my very well-respected almost coworker, Jacob, is going to prove that to you tonight at 5 o'clock in his breakout session. Please, come one, come all. I know a lot of other companies have also very cool sessions planned. Forget it. Just go there. It's really awesome. All right, I'm done. Thank you guys for being such an attentive audience. And I'll be around for the next 2 days.